All the food that we have, it has tomatoes. It's part of Mexico, yeah.
About 90% of the fresh tomatoes eaten in the US come from Mexico. That's more than $3 billion in trade that's flowed quietly across the border for years. But all of that changed on July 14th, 2025. With no warning, no phase-in period, and no public explanation, the US government slapped a sudden 17% tariff on all imported tomatoes. There were no speeches, no debates, just a line of policy and silence. In the weeks that followed, tomato prices spiked. In Raleigh, North Carolina, prices shot up over 40%. At one local store, a mother picked up a tomato, hesitated, and put it back. Salsa disappeared from restaurant menus. School salads turned pale. And across the country, shoppers quietly wondered, what just happened? This wasn't about farming. It wasn't about fairness. It was a shift, a break from a long-standing system. Overnight, the humble tomato became a political symbol. Brazil responded by signing a 5-year deal with the Netherlands to ship organic vegetables directly via the Port of Signs in Portugal. No US middlemen, no policy whiplash. Colombia and Peru also acted quickly, rerouting major exports to Canada through Vancouver and Halifax instead of Los Angeles or Houston. But perhaps the most telling move didn't come from Latin America. It came from East Asia. In August, trade delegations from Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan landed in Cederos, Mexico, not to negotiate deals, but to study how Mexico had rebuilt its export system without relying on the US One Korean trade advisor called Mexico the blueprint of resilience. And they're not just studying. According to Bloomberg, Japanese and German companies are now looking at Mexico's electronics hubs as launching pads into global markets, built around trade agreements that no longer include the United States. Canada saw what was happening and moved fast. In September, Agricorp Ontario began testing bilingual packaging lines that legally rebrand Mexican tomatoes as product of Canada under USMCA rules. It's fully compliant, logistically smooth, and politically bulletproof. One Canadian official didn't mince words. If the US wants chaos, we'll offer certainty. Because this isn't just about fruit. It's about who the world trusts to deliver goods without a sudden tweet or surprise tariff. Even the European Central Bank warned in a July 2025 memo that global trade routes are quietly shifting away from US-centered supply chains. What started in agriculture could soon affect cars, semiconductors, even biotech. The world isn't boycotting the US, they're just working around it. Silently, efficiently, permanently. Because today, it's tomatoes. Tomorrow, it could be circuit boards, brake pads, or syringes. Mexico didn't walk away in protest, they left with precision. Canada didn't push, they just opened the door and waited. And American shoppers, they're now paying more for less, still being told it's all in the name of protecting farmers. But maybe, just maybe, this was never just about tomatoes. Maybe this is the first crack in something much bigger. Is this a tomato war, or the beginning of America's global trade unraveling? Do we choose patriotic prices, or practical groceries? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the Timefold channel. And it's not just tomatoes anymore. Strawberries, avocados, bell peppers, they're all heading north. Not to the US, but to Canada. No headlines, no grand statements, just quiet contracts. While US tariffs dominated the news cycle, Canada took a different approach. Instead of press conferences, Canadian grocery giants like Loblaws, Metro, and Sobeys sent executives directly to the farms of Guanajuato and Jalisco in Mexico. They didn't come for photo ops. They came to inspect. They walked the fields, checked irrigation systems, tasted the produce. Then they signed, locking in 5-year supply deals through 2030. No threats, no political grandstanding. Just stable, predictable logistics. One supply chain director from Metro put it plainly, "We don't sign deals based on election cycles." That one sentence said everything Mexico needed to hear. Because while Washington flips trade policies every few years, Ottawa keeps its promises for decades. And that quiet consistency, boring as it may seem, is what turned Canada from an afterthought into a cornerstone of Mexican agricultural exports. According to FreightWaves, Mexico is expected to send nearly 48% of its fresh tomatoes to Canada by 2026, up from less than 1% just 2 years ago. Let that sink in. From almost nothing to nearly half the market in just 18 months. And it's not stopping at tomatoes. The same cold rail lines now carry avocados, strawberries, and bell peppers. They no longer flow through US ports. They go straight into Canadian distribution hubs, from Quebec City to Vancouver. Meanwhile, the numbers tell a very different story in the US. According to the analytics firm A-Tools, the wholesale price of imported tomatoes in the US jumped 22% in July 2025 alone. Retailers blame tariffs, long inspection delays, and inconsistent enforcement from federal agencies. One Florida produce manager put it like this: "It's like playing roulette with perishables." Compare that to Canada, where a more streamlined cold chain has lowered the average cost per crate by 8%. Fewer delays, more reliability. On the US side, the consequences are already visible. Import warehouses from Buffalo to El Paso are shutting down. In McAllen, Texas, one tomato distributor laid off 74 workers in a single month. Meanwhile, across the border in Windsor, Ontario, a brand new refrigerated storage center opened, fully staffed and fully booked into early 2026. This wasn't just a policy move, it was a tax on the dinner table. Maria, a single mother from New Jersey, used to buy a pound of tomatoes every Sunday. Now she skips them. At $4 a pound, she buys canned beans instead. Cheaper, saltier, shelf-stable. Her 5-year-old son doesn't notice. But one day, his heart might. In Laredo, Texas, Tom, a retired welder living on Social Security, says the produce aisle feels like a luxury store now. Used to be, you could get a week's worth of groceries for $20. Now I just walk past and head to the freezer section. In Detroit, the Wilson family, who rely on SNAP benefits, are trying to stretch $173 across a week. Tomatoes, avocados, and peppers are off the list. "We haven't had a fresh salad in 3 weeks," the mother says. "Just coleslaw and potatoes." This wasn't a natural disaster. It was deliberate policy. And it landed not in press briefings, but in school lunches and family kitchens. According to Axios and ABC News, US tomato prices spiked between 30 and 45% in just 2 months after the July 2025 tariff. Some grocers reported price hikes of 60% for organic and heirloom varieties. Fast food chains quietly pulled pico de gallo and fresh salsa from their menus. Even public schools were hit. In Champaign County, Illinois, tomato wedges disappeared from lunch trays, replaced with pre-packaged shredded lettuce. One teacher put it bluntly: "The kids noticed. They asked where the red went." When policy fails, even the color drains from the plate. A $4 tomato isn't just expensive. It's symbolic. It's not just a fruit anymore. It's a referendum. On priorities, on planning, on who bears the cost when governments gamble. The tariff was supposed to protect American farmers, but farmers are still battling climate change, water scarcity, and labor shortages. Instead of solutions, they got headlines. And consumers, those with no say in the matter, are the ones paying the price. In communities already struggling, a missing tomato isn't just about taste, it's about dignity. It's a quiet loss in what it means to eat well in America. So yes, the tariff targeted foreign growers, but its impact was felt in US kitchens, lunchboxes, and grocery lists. If a tomato can slip through America's fingers, what else might follow? By late July 2025, logistics firms in Rotterdam and Hamburg were mapping new cold chains from Brazil to Europe, completely bypassing the US. Why pay more? One Dutch supplier asked. For politics dressed up as trade. That one decision on July 14th rewrote the rules of North American agriculture. The US formally ended the 2019 tomato suspension agreement with Mexico, a trade deal that had helped keep prices steady and supply chains predictable for years. That agreement had acted like a safety valve. When disputes arose, it kept trade flowing smoothly. But this time, there were no talks, no panels, just a press release and a sudden 17% tariff, effective immediately. According to Axios and ABC News, there was no delay, no exceptions, not even for tomatoes already en route. Trucks already heading north were taxed the moment they crossed the border. Importers felt blindsided. Economists called it reckless. Grocery chains called it a crisis. Within 2 months, tomato prices in US cities jumped 30 to 45%. In Raleigh, beefsteak tomatoes went from $2.99 to $4.35 a pound. In Los Angeles, Roma tomatoes, once under $1, shot past $3.80. For working families, that wasn't just inflation, it was a direct hit. Salads disappeared from school lunches. Fast food chains swapped out fresh salsa for processed paste. In suburban kitchens, tomato sauce was watered down and stretched to last an extra night. But the damage wasn't just in grocery aisles. In Florida, dozens of small Latino-owned import businesses collapsed within weeks. They couldn't handle the shock. One by one, they shut down. Hundreds of warehouse workers, drivers, and supply chain coordinators, many of them with decades of experience, were laid off. No headlines, no help. Just closed doors and final paychecks. Even policy experts were caught off guard. Analysts had expected changes, but not this. A 17% tariff with no warning, no hearings, no plan. A July 2025 report from MarketWatch warned the disruption could ripple into other industries: packaging, refrigeration, transportation. Small logistics firms could falter, and food prices across the board could climb even higher. The official explanation from Washington? To protect American farmers. But who exactly were they protecting? Florida's tomato farms only operate a few months each year. States like New York, Minnesota, and Illinois depend almost entirely on imports to stock their shelves. Even California, once a tomato giant, has seen its production decline for years, thanks to droughts and labor shortages. So the real question grew louder with every grocery trip. Was this really about farming, or was it about politics? Mexico didn't fight the tariff. They didn't file complaints or hold press conferences. They went to work. While Washington issued policies, Mexico drew up plans. No angry statements, no threats, no drama. Just strategy and steel rails. In just 3 months, a new supply corridor was up and running, efficiently and quietly, completely bypassing the US tomatoes, now rolled daily from Bio, Mexico's agricultural hub, through northern Chihuahua and straight into Ontario and Quebec. No US checkpoints, no border delays, no tariffs. It's a refrigerated supply chain built with precision, not protest. Insulated, sensor-controlled containers keep produce at a consistent 166 during the 2,000-kilometer journey. The result? 4 to 5 extra days of shelf life, less spoilage, fewer rejections, and, most importantly, lower costs. Canadian Pacific Kansas City, CPKC, reports that this rail route cuts logistics costs by 15% compared to traditional trucking through the US. While America taxed the tomato, Mexico made it smarter. At first, it looked like a temporary fix, but then came the contracts. Canada's top grocery chains, Loblaws, Metro, and others, didn't just tour Mexican farms. They signed 5-year supply agreements. And with each container headed north, a message became clear. Mexico wasn't coming back. There was no press release from Mexico's trade ministry, no statements from the president. Just a quiet shift in where the tomatoes were going, and where trust now lived. As one senior trade advisor in Ottawa put it, they didn't fight the tariff, they outgrew it. What stings even more for the US is that the change didn't just shift tomatoes, it shifted entire supply chains. Buyers who once depended on Texas distribution hubs are now investing in cold storage in Montreal and Toronto. Ports in California and Arizona are seeing fewer shipments, fewer contracts. And back in the US, retailers, farmers, and shoppers are left watching rail cars full of tomatoes pass them by. Not with anger, just confusion. There was no big showdown, no final argument, no compromise. Mexico didn't scale the tariff wall. They tunneled beneath it, quietly, efficiently, and permanently. And that tunnel may be here to stay. A recent Bloomberg Green report predicts that by 2026, nearly half, 48%, of Mexico's fresh tomato exports will go to Canada. Just 2 years ago, that number was under 1%.